At 2:47 a.m., the emergency room finally went quiet. Not peaceful, just hollow. The kind of silence that comes after too much blood, too many alarms, and one decision that can never be undone. Eleanor Ellie Brooks stood alone at the stainless steel sink, scrubbing her hands long after the water had turned lukewarm. Her fingers trembled slightly, not from fatigue. She'd learned to work through exhaustion decades ago, but from the weight of what she had just done. She glanced at the wall clock. Red digital numbers blinked back at her like an accusation. The man on bed 7 was alive. That was the problem. Ellie dried her hands on a paper towel and tossed it into the trash. Her reflection in the polished steel looked older than 52 tonight. Gray threaded her dark hair, pulled into a tight bun. Her eyes, usually steady, unreadable, carried something sharper now. Fear, or maybe defiance. The patient had come in without ID, no insurance, no emergency contact. Just a man in his late 60s, found collapsed behind a closed bookstore, soaked from the rain and already slipping into septic shock by the time the ambulance arrived. Protocol had been clear, and Ellie had ignored it. She had cracked open a sealed medication drawer that required 2 authorizations and a supervisor's code. She had administered a high-cost antibiotic reserved for insured trauma cases. She had done it calmly, efficiently, and without asking permission, because waiting would have killed him. Ellie had watched his blood pressure stabilize. She had listened to his breathing even out. She had seen color return to a face that had been gray minutes earlier. She had saved his life. The automatic doors to the ER hissed open behind her. Eleanor Brooks. The voice was smooth, polished, too calm for this hour. Ellie didn't turn right away. She finished adjusting the cuffs of her scrubs, then faced the man standing 10 feet away, flanked by fluorescent light and a faint smell of expensive cologne. Victor Hale never looked tired. At 34, he wore his authority like a tailored suit. Sharp lines, neutral colors, no wasted emotion. His tablet was tucked under one arm. His tie was perfectly knotted, even at nearly 3 in the morning. "Director Hale?" Ellie said evenly. Victor smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Come with me." The break room felt smaller than usual. The vinyl couch squeaked as Ellie sat. A vending machine hummed in the corner, half empty and forgotten. Victor remained standing. "I've reviewed the incident report," he said, tapping his tablet. "You accessed restricted medication without authorization." Ellie folded her hands in her lap. The patient was coding. There wasn't time. There's always time for protocol. There wasn't time for paperwork, she corrected. There was time to save him. Victor sighed. The sound rehearsed. "Mercy Ridge Medical Center operates within regulations, Ellie. We are audited. We are accountable." She looked up at him then. "So was my father. He died waiting for approval." That earned her a flicker of irritation. "This isn't personal," Victor said, "but you've created a liability." "A human being is not a liability." "In this building," Victor replied calmly, "everything has a cost." He placed a single sheet of paper on the table between them. Termination notice. Ellie stared at it, not moving. "You're suspended effective immediately," Victor continued, "pending review by the board. I'd advise you to seek alternative employment." "How convenient," she said quietly. Victor's smile returned, thinner this time. "Security will escort you out." The words landed heavier than any shouted accusation ever could. Ellie stood. Her legs felt distant, like they belonged to someone else. She walked down the hallway, past nurses she had trained, doctors she had covered for, residents who suddenly found the floor fascinating. No one met her eyes. At her locker, she moved slowly. Her stethoscope, old, scratched, a gift from her late husband, went into her tote bag. A folded photo of her daughter followed. Her hospital badge came off last. When Ellie reached the main lobby, rain streaked down the glass walls, blurring the city lights into long silver lines. The night guard, Jonah Pike, straightened when he saw her. "Rough shift?" he asked gently. She managed a small nod. As she pushed through the doors, thunder rolled overhead. That was when the lights outside flared. 3 black SUVs rolled into the emergency bay, engines humming low and controlled. Not ambulances, not police. The lobby froze. Men stepped out in synchronized precision, broad shoulders, dark jackets, eyes that scanned rather than wandered. They moved like people trained to expect danger, not attention. Victor Hale emerged from the administrative corridor, irritation already rising. "You can't park there," he snapped. "This is hospital property." The lead man didn't slow. He walked straight past Victor, straight toward Ellie. Her heart slammed against her ribs. For a split second, she wondered if this was it, if the medication drawer, the missing minutes on the camera feed, had finally caught up with her. The man stopped 3 feet away. Up close, he was intimidating in a quiet way. Early 40s, weathered face, a thin scar cutting through one eyebrow. He studied her as if confirming something only he could see. Then, impossibly, he lowered his head. "Ma'am," he said, voice steady, "you're not safe here." Behind him, the other men took position. Not aggressive, not defensive, just prepared. The lobby held its breath. Victor found his voice again. "Excuse me, who do you think you are?" The man didn't look at him. Ellie swallowed. "I don't understand." "You will," he said. "But we need to leave. Now." Rain hammered against the glass harder than before. Ellie glanced back at the hospital, the place that had been her life for 27 years, the place that had just erased her with a signature. She tightened her grip on her tote bag. "Who are you?" she asked. The man met her eyes. "Someone who owes you his life," he said quietly. And with that, everything Ellie thought she understood about that night began to unravel. The rain didn't let up as Eleanor Brooks stepped into the night. Cold drops soaked through her thin jacket within seconds, but she barely noticed. Her mind was still stuck inside the hospital, inside the break room, inside Victor Hale's voice, inside the word terminated, echoing over and over like a flatline alarm that refused to shut off. The black SUVs idled behind her, engines low, patient, as if they already knew she would hesitate. Ellie took 3 steps toward the parking lot before stopping. "I don't go anywhere with strangers," she said without turning around. "That's reasonable," the man replied calmly, "but staying here is dangerous." She finally faced him. Up close, the rain clung to his jacket, darkening the fabric. His eyes never left her face, not invasive, not rushed, just alert. "Dangerous how?" she asked. Before he could answer, Victor Hale burst through the sliding doors. "Rain be damned." "This is unacceptable," Victor snapped. "You are interfering with hospital operations. I'm calling the police." Ellie watched him with a strange detachment, as if he were already part of her past. "You already took everything else," she said quietly. "What's left to interfere with?" Victor ignored her and pointed at the men. "Identify yourselves." The man beside Ellie finally turned. "Sir, step back." Victor laughed. "You don't give me orders in my facility." The man leaned in just enough to lower his voice. "You don't want to be standing this close when what's coming reaches you." Victor froze, not because of the words, but because of the certainty behind them. Ellie felt a vibration in her tote bag, her phone. She pulled it out, her hands shaking now for the first time all night. 3 missed calls, a voicemail, then another call. Incoming. Her bank. She answered without thinking. "Ms. Brooks," the representative said, polite but firm, "we attempted to process your mortgage payment. It was declined." Ellie closed her eyes. "That's not possible," she said. "I have automatic." "Your account has been temporarily restricted," the woman continued. "We were notified of a pending employment status change. Our system flagged." Ellie hung up. The rain felt heavier now. She opened her email. One message after another loaded in rapid succession. Human Resources, Credentialing Board, Insurance Provider. Your hospital privileges have been suspended pending investigation. Your malpractice coverage is under review. Please do not report to work until further notice. Victor smiled, satisfied. It's standard procedure. Ellie stared at the screen. 27 years. Gone in under an hour. The man beside her spoke again, lower this time. This is what I meant. She looked up at him. You planned this? No, he said. They did. Another SUV door opened. A woman stepped out holding a folder sealed with a red strip. She approached Ellie directly. Eleanor Brooks. Ellie nodded. Someone wants you isolated, the woman said. Fired, discredited, financially frozen. That doesn't happen by accident. Ellie let out a short, humorless laugh. I broke protocol. That's accident enough. The woman shook her head. No, this is a setup. Victor's smile vanished. You're making accusations you can't prove. Actually, the woman replied, holding up the folder, we can. Ellie's heart began to pound harder. Prove what? The man with the scar finally answered her question. That the patient you saved tonight wasn't just a patient. Ellie's stomach dropped. He was carrying information, the man continued. Information someone was desperate to retrieve before he died. Ellie shook her head. No, he was barely conscious. He didn't even know his name. That's why he trusted you, the woman said gently. He knew you wouldn't ask questions. Ellie felt suddenly nauseous. She remembered the man's grip, weak, insistent, as she adjusted his IV, the way his eyes had locked onto hers, not panicked, but resolved. He squeezed my hand, Ellie whispered. The man nodded once. And passed you something. Ellie's breath caught. I don't have... Her hand slipped into the inner pocket of her scrubs without thinking. Her fingers touched something hard, small, cold. She pulled it out slowly, a micro drive wrapped in gauze-stained brown with old blood. The world seemed to tilt. Victor stepped forward. That doesn't belong to you. Ellie looked at him sharply. You knew. Victor's silence was answer enough. Jesus, Ellie breathed. You used him. Victor straightened. You're a nurse. You should understand sacrifice. That did it. Ellie laughed. Not softly, not kindly. You don't get to say that word. The man with the scar moved between them instantly. We're done here. Victor pointed toward Ellie. She's contaminated evidence. She's my responsibility. No, the man replied. She's your mistake. He gestured toward the SUVs. Ellie hesitated again, her gaze drifting back to the hospital doors, to the place she had loved even when it didn't love her back. If I leave, she said, I don't get my life back. The woman met her eyes. If you stay, you don't keep it. Thunder cracked overhead, sharp and final. Ellie looked down at the micro drive in her hand, then at her phone, now buzzing with another alert. Your insurance coverage has been suspended. She closed her fingers around the drive. Okay, she said softly, I'm coming. The man opened the SUV door. As Ellie stepped inside, she didn't know yet that this was the last normal decision she would ever make, but she did know one thing with absolute clarity. Losing her job had not been the punishment, it had been the opening move. The SUV door closed behind Eleanor Brooks with a soft, final thud. The sound was strangely gentle for something that felt so permanent. Inside, the vehicle smelled faintly of leather and rain. The windows were tinted so dark they erased the outside world completely. Ellie sat stiffly on the seat, her tote bag clutched in both hands, the micro drive pressed into her palm like a secret she hadn't agreed to carry. The engine pulled away from the curb. Just like that, Mercy Ridge Medical Center disappeared behind them. Ellie leaned forward, peering through the front windshield. The hospital's glowing sign faded into the rain, then into nothing at all. 27 years of her life reduced to a reflection on wet asphalt. No goodbye, no closure, only motion. Where are you taking me? She asked. The man with the scar sat across from her, posture relaxed but alert. 2 other men occupied the front seats. No one wore uniforms, no badges, no names. Somewhere safe, he said. Ellie huffed quietly. That's what people say right before they ruin your life. He didn't argue. Your life was already being dismantled. She turned to the window, watching blurred streetlights slide past. You still haven't told me who you are." He considered that for a moment. "My name is Caleb Rourke." Something stirred at the sound of it. Not a memory, more like a shadow of one. "And you?" she asked, nodding toward the woman in the passenger seat. "Mara," the woman replied. "That's all you need right now." Ellie nodded slowly. Figures. Silence settled in as the SUV merged onto the highway. The city thinned out, buildings giving way to warehouses, then empty stretches of road slick with rain. Ellie's phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't an email. It was a text from an unknown number. "You should have stayed quiet." Her stomach dropped. She showed the screen to Caleb. His jaw tightened. "They're moving faster than expected." "Who?" Ellie demanded. Caleb met her eyes. "People who don't like loose ends." The SUV accelerated. Ellie felt her pulse spike. "I didn't do anything wrong." "You did everything right," Mara said. "That's the problem." Ellie shook her head. "I'm a nurse. I don't play spy games." Caleb leaned forward slightly. "Tonight, you didn't play anything. You became something." That didn't help. The vehicle exited the highway and turned onto an unmarked service road lined with chain-link fencing. Floodlights flickered on as they approached a gated entrance. Ellie frowned. "This doesn't look safe." "It is," Caleb said. "For now." The gate slid open without the SUV stopping. Inside, a long, low building sat behind layers of fencing, its windows dark, its presence deliberately forgettable. The SUV rolled to a stop near a side entrance. Caleb opened the door. "We need to move." Ellie stepped out, her shoes splashing lightly in shallow puddles. The rain had softened to a mist, but the air still felt heavy, charged. Inside, the building was warm and quiet. Too quiet. The hallway smelled faintly of disinfectant. Clean, but not hospital clean. Controlled. Ellie's chest tightened. They guided her into a small room furnished with a table, 2 chairs, and a security camera in the corner. Caleb gestured to a seat. "Please." Ellie didn't sit. "If you're going to interrogate me, I'd rather stand." Mara closed the door behind them. "This isn't an interrogation." "Then what is it?" Ellie snapped. Caleb reached into his jacket and pulled out a thin folder. He placed it on the table. "This," he said, "is everything Victor Hale didn't expect you to survive." Ellie stared at the folder, but didn't touch it. Caleb opened it himself. Inside were printed emails, transaction logs, internal memos stamped confidential. Ellie scanned the pages, her brow furrowing. "These are hospital records," she said. "Budget approvals, vendor contracts." "Yes," Caleb replied. "And kickbacks, shell accounts, patient manipulation." Ellie's breath caught. "You're telling me Victor wasn't acting alone," Mara finished. "The hospital is just one node in a larger operation." Ellie felt the room tilt. "The patient tonight." "A courier," Caleb said. "He knew he was dying. He chose where to collapse." Ellie's throat tightened. "He chose me?" Caleb nodded. 18 years ago, in a desert clinic halfway across the world, you broke protocol to save a young man who shouldn't have lived." Ellie froze. Images flashed uninvited. Sand, heat, blood-soaked bandages, the sound of gunfire far too close. "You were there," she whispered. Caleb's expression softened. "I was." The memory snapped into focus. A young soldier, barely conscious, eyes wide with pain and fear. "You flatlined," Ellie said, voice trembling. "I thought you died." "I almost did," Caleb replied, "but you didn't let me." The room went very still. "That operation was buried," Ellie said. "I was sent home. I was warned never to talk about it. And I spent the rest of my life paying that debt forward," Caleb said quietly. Ellie looked down at her hands. "I didn't save you to be repaid." "I know," he said. "That's why we're here." Mara checked her watch. "We're running out of time." Ellie looked up sharply. "What does that mean?" Before Mara could answer, the lights flickered. Once. Twice. Then the building shuddered as something heavy struck the outer gate. Caleb was on his feet instantly. "They found us!" Ellie's heart slammed. "Already?" Mara pressed a finger to her earpiece. "We have company, multiple vehicles." Ellie backed away instinctively. This wasn't supposed to happen. Caleb grabbed her tote bag and shoved it into her hands. "Listen to me. From this moment on, you don't exist." "What?" Ellie protested. "Your name is compromised. Your credentials are poison. Anyone connected to you is vulnerable." Ellie's voice cracked. "My daughter? She's being protected," Mara said quickly. "She's already being moved." Ellie felt tears sting her eyes. "You don't get to decide that." "We don't," Caleb said. "They do." Another impact shook the building. Alarms began to wail, low and urgent. Caleb opened a concealed door behind the table, revealing a narrow corridor. "Ellie," he said firmly, "you trusted your instincts tonight. Trust them again." She hesitated only a second. Then she stepped forward. As the corridor swallowed them and the door sealed shut behind her, Eleanor Brooks understood something terrifying and irreversible. She hadn't just been fired. She had been erased. The corridor was narrow and dim, lit by recessed lights that hummed softly overhead. Eleanor Brooks moved as quickly as her legs would allow, her breath shallow, her heart pounding with a rhythm she hadn't felt since the worst nights in the emergency room. Behind them, metal slammed against metal. Shouts echoed, muffled but urgent. Caleb Rourke didn't look back. "This way," he said, guiding her through a sharp turn. Ellie clutched her tote bag like a lifeline. The micro drive inside felt heavier now, as if it carried not just data, but consequences. They burst into a smaller room filled with monitors and equipment racks. Maps glowed on the walls. Red indicators pulsed steadily. Mara locked the door behind them. "We've got maybe 4 minutes." Ellie stared at her. 4 minutes? Until what? "Until they breach," Mara replied. "Or until we disappear, whichever comes first." Ellie's mind reeled. "You said I'd be safe." Caleb turned to her, his face serious but steady. "I said we'd try." That honesty hit harder than reassurance ever could. Ellie sank into a chair, her knees finally giving out. The adrenaline that had carried her this far began to drain, replaced by a deep, bone-level exhaustion. "You said you were there," she whispered, looking at Caleb. 18 years ago." He nodded. "Southern Border Clinic. Humanitarian corridor. Officially, it didn't exist." Ellie swallowed. The room faded, replaced by heat and dust and the constant thud of rotor blades. She saw it clearly now. The canvas walls of the clinic flapping violently in the wind, blood everywhere, the sharp smell of antiseptic barely masking smoke and sand. She had been younger then, stronger, still naive enough to believe that saving lives was always enough. "They told us it was a green zone," Ellie said quietly. "They were wrong." Caleb leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "We walked into an ambush." Ellie closed her eyes. She remembered the moment the first explosion hit, the way the ground had jumped beneath her feet, the screams, the confusion, the young man on the stretcher, bleeding out faster than anyone could stop it. Caleb. "You were barely conscious," she said. "Your vitals were crashing." "You weren't supposed to touch me," Caleb replied. "You knew that." Ellie opened her eyes, meeting his gaze. "I knew you were dying." The memory tightened her chest. "They told me to step away," she continued. "Said you were a lost cause. Said I didn't have the authority." She laughed softly, bitter. "Authority doesn't mean much when someone's heart is failing in your hands." Caleb's voice was low. "You broke every rule." "Yes," Ellie said, "and they made sure I paid for it." She remembered the aftermath, the reprimands, the quiet meetings, the way her name had been scrubbed from official reports. She had been sent home under the guise of mental health recovery, a polite exile. "I thought that was the end of it," Ellie said. "I went back to my life, my husband, my daughter. I told myself it was just one bad chapter." Caleb shook his head. It was the chapter that changed everything. Mara glanced at the monitors. 2 minutes. Ellie looked up sharply. You said the patient tonight chose me. He did, Caleb confirmed. Because of that night. Ellie frowned. That doesn't make sense. How would he even know who I am? Because your name never fully disappeared, Mara said. It was buried, classified, but some people knew where to look. Ellie's stomach twisted. So Victor Hale was handed your file, Caleb said. Not the real one, the edited version, enough to know you were useful, disposable. Ellie's hands curled into fists. He didn't fire me because I broke protocol. No, Caleb said. He fired you because you were the only person in that ER who wouldn't hesitate to do the right thing. The room shook as another impact hit the outer wall. Ellie flinched. You said they're protecting my daughter. They are, Mara said firmly. She's already in transit. Different name. Different route. Ellie's voice cracked. She didn't sign up for this. Neither did you, Caleb said. Ellie stood abruptly. Then why me? Why not destroy the evidence and be done with it? Caleb held her gaze. Because you're the evidence. Ellie stared at him. You touched it, he continued, handled it, saved the man who carried it, and now you're the only one alive who can testify to the chain of events. Ellie's chest felt tight. They'll call me unstable, say I imagined it. They already tried, Mara said. Your HR file was updated an hour ago. Notes added, concerns raised. Ellie laughed, hollow. Of course they were. Caleb stepped closer. This is the part where you decide. Decide what? Ellie snapped. I didn't choose any of this. No, he agreed. But you can choose what happens next. The lights flickered again. This time they didn't come back on fully. Mara swore under her breath. We're out of time. A concealed panel slid open behind one of the equipment racks, revealing a narrow stairwell leading downward. Emergency exit, Mara said. It'll get us to the secondary transport. Ellie hesitated at the top of the stairs. Her mind raced, images of her daughter, her old life, the quiet apartment she might never see again. I'm not a hero, she said softly. I'm tired. I just wanted to help people. Caleb met her eyes. That's exactly why they're afraid of you. A distant crash echoed above them. Shouting followed. Mara urged, Ellie, now. Ellie took a breath, then another. She thought of the man in bed 7, the pressure of his hand, the look in his eyes. She stepped onto the stairs. As the door sealed behind them and darkness swallowed the space, Eleanor Brooks finally understood the truth she had been avoiding for years. Her past hadn't stayed buried. It had been waiting, and now it was coming to collect. The stairwell smelled of concrete and cold metal. Each step echoed too loudly, as if the building itself were counting them down. Eleanor Brooks gripped the railing, her knuckles white, forcing her breathing to stay slow and controlled. Panic had no place here. Panic made mistakes. Caleb descended behind her, one hand hovering near her back, not touching, but ready. Mara moved ahead, a small flashlight cutting a narrow path through the dark. Keep moving, Mara said. Don't stop. Ellie didn't ask why. She already knew. The stairwell opened into a low underground corridor. Exposed pipes lined the ceiling. The air was damp, stale, nothing like the clean sterility of a hospital. This place was built for one purpose only: escape. They reached a steel door marked, Authorized Personnel Only. Mara swiped a card. The lock clicked open. Inside was a garage. Not the kind Ellie was used to. No white lines, no numbered spaces. Just concrete, shadows, and a single unmarked van waiting with its engine running. Ellie stopped short. No, she said. I'm not getting in another vehicle without answers. Caleb didn't rush her. You deserve them. Mara checked her watch again. You have 3 minutes. Ellie turned to Caleb. You said this was about the patient, about the drive. It is, he replied, but not in the way you think. Ellie crossed her arms, grounding herself. Then explain. Caleb exhaled slowly. Victor Hale was never the architect. He was a gatekeeper. Ellie frowned. For who? For a consortium, Caleb said. Private medical suppliers, insurance underwriters, defense-adjacent contractors. They use hospitals like yours to move money quietly. Ellie felt a chill. Through patients. Through people, Caleb corrected. Uninsured, unhoused, veterans, anyone unlikely to be questioned. Ellie's stomach twisted. The man I saved was one of theirs, Mara said, until he wasn't. Ellie looked sharply at her. What does that mean? He decided to talk, Mara continued. He took evidence, account trails, transaction logs, enough to bring the entire structure down. Ellie shook her head. Then why come to a public ER? Why not disappear? Because he was dying, Caleb said, and because he knew they'd be watching. Ellie remembered the man's eyes again, clear, intentional. He wanted them to see him collapse, she whispered. Yes, Caleb said, and he wanted to see who would help him anyway. Ellie swallowed hard. So this was a test. In a way, Mara said, and you passed? Ellie let out a shaky breath. So they fired me to isolate me. To discredit you, Caleb added, to make anything you said sound like desperation. Ellie laughed bitterly. They didn't even need to fake much. Mara nodded. They amplified what already existed. Old reprimands, notes about you being emotionally involved with patients, one comment about burnout. Ellie's jaw tightened. Victor Hale wrote those. He did, Caleb confirmed, at their request. Ellie felt anger rise, hot and sharp. And now, Caleb said, they're trying to retrieve the drive, and if they can't, they erase me, Ellie finished. Mara didn't deny it. Ellie looked at the van again. You said Victor wasn't the final villain. He's not, Caleb said. He's already being positioned as a fall guy. Ellie turned back to him sharply. Meaning, Caleb continued, that if this goes public, Victor Hale takes the hit. The consortium survives. New administrators, new systems, same corruption. Ellie's chest tightened. So what's the point? Caleb stepped closer. The point is timing. Mara reached into her jacket and pulled out a tablet. She turned the screen toward Ellie. A video feed played. Victor Hale sat in a conference room, flanked by two men Ellie didn't recognize. His posture was rigid. His confident smile was gone. Live feed, Mara said, 10 minutes ago. Victor's voice came through the speakers. I followed instructions. Every decision was approved. One of the men leaned forward. You were sloppy. Ellie's breath caught. They're interrogating him. They're severing ties, Caleb said, publicly if needed. Ellie watched as Victor's face paled. He's scared. Yes, Caleb said, because he just realized the truth. Ellie looked up. Which is? That he was never protected, Caleb replied. Only useful. The video cut to black. Mara locked the tablet. That's your twist, Ellie. Victor Hale thinks he set you up. In reality, he's being set up too. Ellie felt something shift inside her. Not pity, not forgiveness, but clarity. He deserves what's coming, she said quietly, but not as the only one. Caleb nodded. Exactly. Ellie tightened her grip on the tote bag. So what do you need from me? Caleb held her gaze. Your voice. Ellie scoffed softly. I'm a nurse who just got fired. You're a witness, Caleb corrected, with first-hand contact, a documented timeline, and credibility they underestimated. Ellie shook her head. They'll destroy me in court. Only if you walk in alone, Mara said. Ellie looked between them. You're talking about going public. Strategically, Caleb said. Not yet, not loud, not emotional. Ellie thought of the ER, the patients she had held while they cried, the ones no one fought for. And if I refuse? She asked. Caleb didn't hesitate. Then we hide you. New identity. Quiet life. Ellie closed her eyes. For a moment, the idea was tempting. No more alarms, no more impossible choices. Just silence. But then she remembered Victor's words. A human being is a cost. Ellie opened her eyes. I won't disappear so they can keep doing this. Caleb's expression softened. I hoped you'd say that. Mara opened the van door. Then we move. Ellie stepped inside. As the van pulled out of the garage and into the night, Ellie stared ahead, her fear slowly hardening into something else. Resolve. Because she finally understood the truth. The trap had never been about destroying her. It had been about underestimating her, and that mistake was going to cost them everything. The van moved through the city without headlights, guided by streetlights and muscle memory. Eleanor Brooks sat in silence, counting her breaths, feeling the hum of the engine vibrate through the floor. Each block they passed felt like another layer of her old life peeling away. Mara drove. Caleb sat beside Ellie, facing forward, alert but calm. No one spoke for several minutes. The quiet wasn't awkward, it was deliberate, a pause before something heavier. Finally, Ellie broke it. You said I had a choice, she said, that I could disappear. Caleb nodded. You still do. She stared at the dark windshield. But you don't believe I will. A corner of his mouth lifted. I didn't say that. Ellie exhaled. You knew me before tonight. In a different version of your life, Caleb said, before you learned how to hide. The van slowed, then turned into an underground loading bay beneath an office tower that looked abandoned from the outside. Mara parked and cut the engine. Out, she said, we're on a clock. They stepped into the concrete bay. The air smelled faintly of oil and old rain. A freight elevator waited with its doors open, lights already on. Ellie hesitated. How many places like this do you have? Enough, Mara replied. The elevator descended. The hum was low and steady, like a heartbeat. Ellie's thoughts drifted back despite her efforts, back to the desert clinic, to heat and chaos, to the day she had stopped asking permission. Caleb noticed her distant look. You're remembering. I remember the sound, Ellie said quietly, the way everything else disappeared when I started compressions. I remember thinking, if he dies, it's my fault either way. Caleb nodded. You chose the version you could live with. The elevator opened into a long corridor lined with glass offices. Inside, men and women worked at desks, covered in screens and files. No insignia, no uniforms, just focus. Ellie slowed. This isn't law enforcement. No, Mara said. It's accountability. They led Ellie into a small conference room. A single light hung overhead. On the table lay a manila folder with her name printed neatly on the tab. Ellie stopped cold. That's my file. Caleb pulled out a chair. The real one. Ellie sat, her hands folded tightly. How long have you been watching me? Watching is the wrong word, Caleb said. Waiting is closer. Mara opened the folder and slid a document across the table. A photograph. Ellie at the clinic, younger, covered in blood, bent over a stretcher. Her throat tightened. I didn't know anyone took pictures. They didn't, Caleb said. Not officially. Ellie looked up sharply. Then who did? Caleb met her eyes. Someone who wanted leverage. Someday. Ellie swallowed. So this debt you keep talking about, it's not just personal. No, Caleb said. It's operational. Ellie leaned back, absorbing that. You didn't come for me because you felt grateful. I came because I owed you, he said evenly, and because they finally made a move. Mara interjected, Victor Hale accelerated the timeline. That gave us an opening. Ellie let out a humorless laugh. I'm the opening. Yes, Caleb said, and the bait. Ellie looked down at her hands. So what's next? Caleb slid another document toward her. A controlled exposure. Ellie skimmed it. You want me to testify? Eventually, Caleb said. But first we need corroboration. Ellie shook her head. I don't have access anymore. You do, Mara said. Just not the way you think. She tapped the folder. Inside were login records, backup keys, notes Ellie recognized as her own handwriting. Ellie stared. These are my old notes. You were meticulous, Mara said. You documented everything even when no one asked you to. Ellie's chest tightened. That was for patient care. And now, Caleb said, it's for survival. Ellie closed her eyes briefly. If this goes wrong, it will, Caleb interrupted gently. Something always does. Ellie opened her eyes. Then why keep going? Caleb didn't answer immediately. He stood and walked to the window overlooking the operations floor. Because the people behind this, he said, don't stop. They adapt, they replace. Ellie stood too, joining him. And you think I can stop them? I think you can expose them, he said. That's different. Ellie considered that. And Victor Hale? Caleb turned. Victor will fall, publicly, painfully. Ellie nodded once. Good. Mara checked her watch again. We have incoming. Ellie's heart jumped. Here? Not exactly, Mara said, but close enough. Caleb looked at Ellie. This is the part where it gets dangerous. Ellie laughed softly. It's been dangerous since bed 7. Caleb reached into his jacket and placed a small device on the table, a burner phone. This is your line, he said. You don't call us, we call you. Ellie hesitated, then picked it up. What if I don't answer? Caleb's gaze was steady. Then we assume you chose the other life. Ellie slipped the phone into her pocket. I won't. Mara opened the door. Time to move. As they stepped back into the corridor, Ellie felt something shift again. Not fear, not anger, but a quiet certainty. She had spent her life paying debts she didn't owe, working overtime, apologizing for caring, absorbing blame meant for broken systems. This debt was different. This one had teeth. As they disappeared into another corridor, Ellie realized something else too, something both terrifying and strangely empowering. The people who set this trap believed she would break. They had no idea how much she could carry, and they were about to find out. The clinic wasn't supposed to exist. That was the first thing Eleanor Brooks understood the moment she stepped inside. No signage, no hospital logo, no framed mission statements on the walls. Just a converted industrial space hidden beneath a decommissioned transit hub, humming quietly with power generators and soft mechanical breaths. Ellie stopped just inside the doorway. The smell hit her immediately. Sterile, but improvised. Alcohol wipes layered over old concrete. Latex, ozone, and something faintly metallic beneath it all. Blood. A man lay on a narrow surgical table at the center of the room. He was unconscious, shirt cut away, chest wrapped in pressure dressings already soaked through. Monitors beeped unevenly, their rhythm unstable, impatient. Ellie's instincts surged before fear could catch up. What happened? She asked sharply, moving forward. 2 gunshot wounds, Mara said. Close range. One exited clean. The other didn't. Ellie was already snapping on gloves. Vitals. BP dropping. Oxygen unstable, Caleb replied. Ellie leaned over the patient, pressing her stethoscope to his chest. Her jaw tightened. Tension pneumothorax, she said instantly. Right side. He's drowning in his own pressure. Caleb looked at her. Can you fix it? Ellie didn't look up. If you want him alive, you stop asking that question and start listening. She reached for a needle, her movements precise, muscle memory taking over. No hesitation, no second guessing. This isn't a hospital, Mara said carefully. If something goes wrong, Ellie cut her off. Something already has. She inserted the needle between the ribs. A sharp hiss of escaping air followed, loud enough to make everyone in the room flinch. The monitor spiked. Better, Ellie said. Not good, better. Caleb exhaled slowly. Who is he? Ellie glanced at the man's face, late 50s, military posture even unconscious, scars old and new. Someone important, she said, which means this is going to get worse. As if on cue, the lights flickered. Mara checked her tablet. Signal interference just spiked. Ellie didn't look away from the patient. Meaning? Meaning we don't have long before someone comes looking, Mara replied. Ellie stripped off her gloves and replaced them with a fresh pair. Then we don't have long to decide. Caleb frowned. Decide what? Ellie met his eyes. Whether we're stabilizing him for transport or operating. The room went quiet. Mara spoke first. Operating where? Ellie gestured around them. Here. Caleb's voice dropped. Ellie, this isn't a trauma center. No, she agreed. It's worse. She leaned over the patient again, checking the dressings. Blood continued to seep through steadily. The bullet's still inside, she said. It nicked something important. If we move him like this, he bleeds out. Mara hesitated. If you operate here and he dies, they'll call it malpractice, Ellie finished. They'll bury me so deep no one ever hears my name again. Caleb watched her closely. And if you don't operate? Ellie's hands stilled. She looked at the patient's face again, at the shallow rise and fall of his chest. Then he dies, she said simply, and whatever he knows dies with him. Silence pressed in. Ellie straightened her shoulders. I need a decision. Now. Caleb nodded once. You operate. Mara's jaw tightened. That puts all of us at risk. Ellie didn't flinch. Welcome to healthcare. She turned back to the table. I need suction, clean clamps, and someone who can hold a retractor without panicking. Caleb stepped forward immediately. Tell me what to do. Ellie met his gaze, searching for hesitation, finding none. Good, she said, because if your hands shake, he dies. She made the incision cleanly, decisively. The room seemed to shrink until nothing existed beyond the narrow pool of light over the patient's chest. Blood welled. Ellie worked through it with calm efficiency, her voice steady as she called out instructions. Pressure here. No, higher. Don't move. Mara hovered near the monitors, heart rate spiking. Expected, Ellie replied. Talk to him. Caleb frowned. He's unconscious. Doesn't matter, Ellie said. People hear more than we think. Caleb leaned closer to the patient. You're not done yet, he said quietly. Stay with us. Ellie located the bullet, lodged dangerously close to an artery. There you are, she murmured. Her fingers were steady, her breathing slow. She extracted the bullet in one controlled motion. The monitor dipped, then steadied. Ellie exhaled. Clamp. Caleb followed instantly. Seconds stretched. Sweat rolled down Ellie's spine. The generators hummed louder, as if aware of the stakes. Then, there, Ellie said. We're past the worst. Mara let out a breath she'd been holding. He's stabilizing. Ellie began closing the incision, methodical now, careful. As she tied the final suture, the patient's hand twitched. Ellie froze. His eyes fluttered open, confused, pain dulled, but aware. He looked at Ellie, and something like recognition passed over his face. You, he rasped. Ellie leaned closer. Don't talk, you're safe. He swallowed. They'll come. I know, Ellie said softly. That's why you're still breathing. His eyes slid to Caleb. You brought her. Caleb nodded. We did. The man's lips twitched. Good. His hand tightened weakly around Ellie's wrist. They'll say you broke the rules, he whispered. Ellie didn't pull away. They've been saying that my whole career. The man managed a breathless chuckle. Then you're exactly who we need. His eyes closed again, slipping back into unconsciousness. Ellie straightened slowly, exhaustion crashing into her all at once. She stripped off her gloves, hands trembling now that it was over. Mara stared at her. You just crossed a line there's no coming back from. Ellie wiped her hands on a towel. That line never protected anyone worth saving. Caleb watched her with something like awe. You just saved him. Ellie shook her head. I bought him time. She looked around the room at the hidden clinic, the sealed doors, the people watching her like she was something dangerous and rare. And now, she continued quietly, they're going to come for me harder than ever. Caleb met her gaze. Are you ready for that? Ellie thought of the ER of bed 7, of the micro drive still hidden in her bag. She nodded. Because now, she said, they've given me something I didn't have before. Mara frowned. What's that? Ellie's voice was calm, certain. Proof. And somewhere above them, unseen and relentless, the countdown had already begun. The room didn't celebrate. That was the first thing Eleanor Brooks noticed after the surgery was done. No relief-filled laughter, no high fives, no dramatic exhale followed by smiles. Just a quiet, electric tension that lingered in the air like static before a storm. The man on the table was alive, for now, stable enough to breathe on his own, stable enough to talk later, and that was exactly what made everything more dangerous. Ellie wiped her hands slowly, the tremor finally reaching her fingers now that adrenaline had nothing left to feed on. She sat down hard on a metal stool, exhaustion pressing into her bones. "How long until he wakes?" she asked. Mara checked the monitors. "An hour? Maybe 2? Ellie nodded. "Then we don't have 2 hours." Caleb looked at her. "What are you thinking?" Ellie leaned forward, elbows on her knees. "You said Victor Hale is being positioned as a fall guy." "Yes," Caleb replied. "The consortium's already cutting him loose." "Then they'll move next," Ellie said. "Fast, quiet. They'll erase whatever they can before this man talks." Mara frowned. "We've isolated the network." Ellie shook her head. "Not enough. People like this don't rely on one system. They rely on confusion." She reached into her tote bag and pulled out the microdrive. The blood-stained gauze looked darker now under the harsh lights. "This isn't just evidence," Ellie continued. "It's leverage, but only if it's seen." Caleb crossed his arms. "Going public too early gets you killed. Staying silent gets everyone else killed later," Ellie shot back. The words hung between them. Mara broke the silence. "There's a middle ground." Ellie turned to her. "I'm listening." Mara tapped her tablet and projected a screen onto the wall. Names, numbers, transaction flows, hospital accounts layered over private contractor shells. "We don't expose everything," Mara said. "We expose enough." Ellie studied the data. "Enough to do what?" "To trigger investigations," Caleb answered. Plural. Ellie's jaw tightened. "And Victor Hale?" "He panics," Caleb said, "which makes him sloppy." As if summoned by his name, Mara's tablet chimed. "Incoming feed." Victor Hale appeared on screen, pacing a sleek office that Ellie now recognized as a private boardroom, not the hospital. His tie was loosened, his hair disheveled. "This is unacceptable," Victor snapped at someone off camera. "I did exactly what you told me to do." A calm voice replied, filtered but unmistakably cold. "You did what you were allowed to do." Ellie felt a chill. "They're recording him." "Yes," Mara said, "and he doesn't know it." Victor ran a hand through his hair. "You promised protection." "You were never promised anything," the voice said. "You were given opportunity." Victor stopped pacing. "She has evidence." There was a pause. Then the voice spoke again. "Then retrieve it." Ellie watched Victor's face change, not into anger, but fear. "She's gone," Victor said. "They took her." Another pause. "Then let her run," the voice replied. "She won't last." The feed cut out. Ellie swallowed. "They think I'm already dead." "Not dead," Caleb corrected. "Insignificant." Ellie laughed quietly. "They've been making that mistake my entire career." Mara looked at Ellie carefully. "If we move now, you become visible." Ellie stood. "Good." Caleb frowned. "Ellie." "No," she interrupted. "I'm done being erased quietly." She walked to the screen and pointed at the web of accounts. "This is healthcare turned into a weapon. I've seen the cost of that on gurneys and stretchers." She turned back to them. "You wanted my voice? You're getting it." Mara hesitated. "Once this starts, there's no off switch." Ellie met her gaze. There never was. A low groan came from the table. All 3 of them turned. The patient stirred, eyes fluttering open again, more focused this time. His breathing was labored but steady. Ellie was at his side instantly. "Easy, don't try to move." He squinted at her. "You stayed." "Yes," Ellie said. "You did too." His lips twitched. Figures. Caleb stepped closer. We need to know what you have. The man swallowed. More than they think, less than they fear. Ellie leaned in. Your name. He hesitated, then said it. Thomas Keller. Mara's eyes widened. That's not the name on the intake record. Thomas smiled faintly. That wasn't the point. Ellie nodded. They used you. Yes, Thomas said, until I decided not to be useful anymore. Ellie held up the microdrive. This? Part of it, Thomas replied. The rest is in motion. Caleb stiffened. What do you mean? Thomas closed his eyes briefly. Dead men make excellent distractions. While they were watching me bleed out in your ER, my testimony was already being filed. Ellie's heart skipped. Filed where? 3 places, Thomas said hoarsely. 1 federal, 1 financial, 1 public. Mara stared at him. Public? Thomas nodded weakly. Timed release, 48 hours. Ellie felt something crack open in her chest. Not fear this time, but awe. You planned this, she whispered. Thomas smiled. I planned to die. You ruined that. Ellie laughed softly despite herself. Story of my life. Caleb looked between them. If this drops, the consortium implodes, Thomas said. They won't vanish, but they'll bleed. Ellie straightened. Then Victor Hale becomes the first domino. Yes, Thomas said, and the loudest. Ellie exhaled slowly. Good. Mara checked her tablet again. We're seeing movement. They're locking accounts, scrubbing records. Ellie nodded, which means they're scared. Caleb met her eyes. This is your moment. Ellie thought of every night she'd gone home exhausted, invisible. Every time she'd swallowed anger to keep a job. Every patient who hadn't survived because the system moved too slowly. She nodded once. Then let's make it count. As the hidden clinic hummed with quiet urgency, Ellie understood something profound. The truth didn't need permission to exist. It only needed someone stubborn enough to refuse to let it disappear. And for the first time since that night in the ER, Eleanor Brooks wasn't running anymore. She was standing exactly where the truth would find her. The collapse didn't come with explosions or sirens. It arrived quietly, disguised as routine. Eleanor Brooks learned that just before dawn, sitting in a windowless room while the world outside began to change without asking permission. Mara stood near the wall, eyes fixed on a bank of screens. Caleb leaned against the table, arms crossed, jaw tight. No one spoke for several minutes. Then Mara broke the silence. It started. Ellie looked up. How bad? Mara didn't smile. Bad enough that it won't stop. She turned one of the screens toward Ellie. A news alert scrolled across the bottom of the screen. Federal investigation launched into multi-state healthcare fraud. Ellie's chest tightened. Another screen flickered to life. A press conference. Men in dark suits. A familiar face stepping up to a podium, visibly shaken. Victor Hale. Ellie stared at him, almost not recognizing the man she'd worked under for years. His confidence was gone. His posture collapsed inward, as if gravity had finally found him. Effective immediately, Victor said into a cluster of microphones. I am stepping down from my position as Director of Operations at Mercy Ridge Medical Center. Ellie felt a strange calm wash over her. This wasn't triumph. This was consequence. A reporter shouted from the crowd, Mr. Hale, were you aware of falsified patient records? Victor swallowed hard. I was following established procedures. Another voice cut in. Did those procedures include accepting kickbacks from private contractors? Victor's eyes darted. Ellie leaned forward unconsciously. He opened his mouth, and then he broke. No, Victor said hoarsely. No, that wasn't. This is being taken out of context. Mara muted the feed. He's done, Caleb said quietly. Ellie nodded. But he's not alone. Mara tapped her tablet. He won't be. Screens shifted again. Bank freezes. Board resignations, corporate logos dimmed to gray as headlines stacked one after another. Insurance giant under scrutiny, defense-adjacent firm denies allegations, whistleblower testimony sealed by federal court. Ellie closed her eyes briefly. The truth hadn't screamed. It had seeped. Caleb watched her closely. "How do you feel?" Ellie considered the question. "Like someone finally turned the lights on." Mara checked another feed. They're scrambling, deleting files, denying knowledge. Ellie opened her eyes. "Too late." Mara nodded. "Exactly." A knock came at the door. All three of them froze. Caleb moved first, stepping between Ellie and the entrance. "Who is it?" A calm voice replied, muffled. "Federal Marshal. We're not here for you." Mara exchanged a look with Caleb, then nodded. "Open it." The door swung inward. Two men entered, credentials visible but not aggressive. Their eyes swept the room once, professional, assessing. "We're looking for Thomas Keller," one of them said. Ellie stepped forward. "He's recovering from surgery." The marshal nodded. "We're aware. He's under protective custody as of now." Ellie's heart raced. "You're taking him?" "Not yet," the marshal replied. "We're securing him." Ellie hesitated. "He saved lives." The marshal met her eyes. "So did you." Something in his tone made Ellie's throat tighten. Caleb cleared his throat. "And her status?" The marshal glanced at a tablet. "Complicated." Ellie laughed softly. "That's one word for it." The marshal's expression softened slightly. "Ms. Brooks, you're not being charged with anything." Ellie blinked. "Yet." "No," he said. "Ever. Your actions tonight are protected under federal whistleblower statutes." Ellie felt her knees weaken. Mara exhaled sharply. "That was fast." The marshal nodded. "It wasn't just you. Multiple agencies were already watching." Ellie absorbed that slowly. "So Victor Hale will likely face charges," the marshal said, "along with several others." Ellie looked back at the muted screen, at Victor's frozen image mid-denial. "He thought he was in control," she murmured. Caleb replied quietly, "He thought he was untouchable." The marshals exited as efficiently as they had arrived. The room fell quiet again. Ellie sank into a chair, exhaustion finally catching up to her fully. Mara studied her. "You did this." Ellie shook her head. "I didn't. I just didn't look away." Caleb smiled faintly. "That's usually enough." Ellie leaned back, staring at the ceiling. "What happens to me now?" Mara hesitated. "Your name will be cleared." Ellie snorted. "That's not the same as getting my life back." Caleb stepped closer. "What life?" Ellie looked at him. "The one where I show up for 12-hour shifts and pretend none of this exists." Caleb nodded. "That life is over." Ellie considered that. Surprisingly, she didn't feel grief. She felt relief. Another alert chimed. Mara read it, then looked up. "Medical board emergency session. They're reversing your suspension." Ellie closed her eyes. "Of course they are." "And," Mara added, "they want a statement." Ellie laughed, the sound tired but genuine. "I don't do press conferences." Caleb tilted his head. "You don't have to." Ellie opened her eyes. "What do I have to do?" Caleb answered without hesitation. "Decide who you want to be next." Ellie thought of the ER of nights without sleep, of being told to care less. She thought of the man on the table, alive because she hadn't. "I don't want my old job back," she said slowly. Mara raised an eyebrow. "You're sure?" Ellie nodded. "I want to make sure this doesn't happen again." Caleb smiled. "Funny, that's exactly what some people are going to ask you to do." Ellie stood, rolling her shoulders. "Then I'll listen." The screens behind them continued to update. Names falling, systems unraveling. The fall was loud now, but Ellie didn't flinch. For the first time in decades, she wasn't bracing for impact. She was watching accountability finally catch up to power, and she knew, without a doubt, that this wasn't the end of her story. It was the point where it finally started making sense. The city woke slowly. From the window of the quiet apartment overlooking the river, Eleanor Brooks watched the early light stretch across the water, pale and forgiving. Morning traffic hummed below, ordinary and indifferent, as if nothing had changed at all. But everything had. Ellie stood barefoot, holding a mug she hadn't realized had gone cold. She hadn't slept. Not really. Her body was still running on the last echoes of adrenaline, her mind replaying fragments of the past 48 hours like scenes from a film she didn't quite recognize as her own. She had been fired, erased, hunted, then vindicated. And now, somehow, she was here, untouched by handcuffs, unburdened by silence. Her phone vibrated on the counter. A message from an unknown number. Your name has been formally cleared. All restrictions lifted. Ellie exhaled slowly and set the phone down. Cleared. The word felt lighter than she expected. She had thought that moment would feel like victory, like relief, like something snapping back into place. Instead, it felt like a door closing gently behind her. A knock sounded at the door. Ellie didn't jump this time. She crossed the apartment and opened it to find Caleb Rourke standing in the hallway. No jacket, no urgency in his posture. Just a man who finally looked like he could breathe. They'll be here in 20 minutes, he said, if you still want to hear them out. Ellie stepped aside. Come in. Caleb glanced around the apartment. It was small, modest, lived in but careful. No signs of wealth, no trophies of success. You could have had more, he said quietly. Ellie shrugged. I had enough. Caleb studied her for a moment. That's not something many people can say, honestly. Ellie sat at the table and gestured for him to join her. So, what are they offering? Caleb leaned back in the chair. A consulting role, medical ethics, oversight, the kind that doesn't answer to hospital administrators. Ellie smiled faintly. So I get to be inconvenient? Yes, Caleb said, professionally. Ellie took a sip of cold coffee and made a face. Do I still get to touch patients? Only if you choose to, he replied. Mostly, you'd be preventing harm before it reaches them. Ellie considered that. For decades, she had been running toward emergencies, toward bleeding and chaos and last chances. She had defined herself by how much she could endure. Now, someone was offering her the chance to stop emergencies before they happened. I don't want to become a symbol, Ellie said quietly. Caleb nodded. They know. And I don't want to destroy my life again for people who will forget my name. They won't, he said, but you're right to say it anyway. Another knock echoed through the apartment. Ellie stood. That'll be them. 3 people entered moments later. No cameras, no press badges, just folders, careful language, and eyes that measured rather than judged. They spoke for 15 minutes. They talked about reform, oversight, accountability. They talked about trust. Ellie listened, asked questions, interrupted when answers drifted too close to abstraction. When they finished, one of them asked gently, "Will you do it?" Ellie didn't answer right away. She thought of Victor Hale standing at a podium, his power evaporating under fluorescent lights. She thought of Thomas Keller, alive because someone had refused to follow the rules. She thought of the countless patients whose names she never learned. "Yes," she said finally, "on my terms." They agreed without hesitation. When the door closed behind them, the apartment felt quieter, but not emptier. Caleb stood. "You just changed how the system sees you." Ellie shook her head. "No, I changed how I see myself." Caleb smiled. "That's usually harder." That afternoon, Ellie visited the clinic. Not the hidden one, not the underground facility, the real one. She walked through sliding glass doors wearing a simple coat, her posture relaxed. The waiting room was full, children crying, phones ringing, a woman arguing softly with the front desk about coverage. Ellie paused, watching it all. No one recognized her. She liked that. A nurse hurried past, nearly colliding with her. "Sorry," the woman muttered. Ellie smiled. You're doing fine." The nurse blinked, then nodded gratefully and moved on. Ellie stepped back outside. She didn't belong there anymore, and that was okay. That evening, as the sun dipped low, Ellie sat on a bench near the river. The city skyline reflected in the water, fractured but beautiful. Her phone buzzed again. A single message from Caleb. "You did good today," Ellie typed back. "So did you." She looked up at the sky, feeling something unfamiliar settle into her chest. Peace. Not the fragile kind that depended on approval, the steady kind that came from alignment. Ellie had lost her job. She had lost her anonymity. She had lost the illusion that doing good quietly was always enough. But she had gained something far more durable. Her name, her voice, her choice. And somewhere, deep within a system that had tried to erase her, a new rule had been written without permission. Compassion was not a weakness. It was leverage. Ellie stood, slipped her phone into her pocket, and walked home as the city lights flickered on one by one. Tomorrow there would be work to do. But tonight, for the first time in a long while, Eleanor Brooks rested, knowing she had kept the one thing no one had been able to take from her, her integrity. The story has come to an end now, and if you're still here with me at this moment, then something in this journey probably touched your heart in a quiet, personal way. Eleanor's path reminds us of a simple but difficult truth. We don't control what happens to us, but we always control how we respond. As the Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Eleanor didn't win because she was louder or stronger. She won because she refused to let bitterness, fear, or injustice take away her integrity. Life will test us unfairly. Sometimes doing the right thing costs us comfort, security, or even our identity. But as Epictetus taught, first say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. Healing begins when we stay aligned with who we truly are, even when the world pushes back. Eleanor's story shows that compassion is not weakness, and dignity is never wasted. If this story resonated with you, if it made you pause and reflect on your own life, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps these stories reach others who may need them just as much as you did tonight.